push back President Trump's demand. Ambassador Sondland pledged to try. I suggested the possibility that Ukrainian Prosecutor General, rather than President Zelensky, would make a statement about the investigations, potentially in coordination with Attorney General Barr's probe into the investigation of interference in the 2016 elections. The next day, September 2nd, Mr. Morrison called to inform me that Mr. Daniluk had asked him to come to his hotel in Warsaw. Mr. Daniluk expressed President Zelensky's concern about the possible loss of U.S. support for Ukraine. In particular, Mr. Morrison relayed to me that the inability of any U.S. officials to respond to the Ukrainians' explicit questions about security assistance was troubling them. I was experiencing the same tension in my dealings with the Ukrainians, including...
Hello and welcome to Hill TV's special live coverage of the impeachment inquiry hearings. Today is the first day of the public hearings in the House Intelligence Committee, chaired by Congressman Adam Schiff. Two people are appearing before the committee: Ambassador Bill Taylor, the Trump administration's top diplomat in Ukraine, and George Kent, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs.
The testimony centers around whether President Trump tried to hold up aid for Ukraine in exchange for dirt on former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. The inquiry is just beginning the out-facing phase. After the Intelligence Committee hearings, the Judiciary Committee can hold hearings if necessary, and they can also begin to draft formal articles of impeachment. That committee is chaired by New York Representative Jerry Nadler. The House is hoping to hold a full vote on the matter by Christmas. And look, whatever you think of whether this was the right move by Democrats, whether you believe these are impeachable offenses, certainly a historic moment, something that we haven't seen in this country but a handful of times. And Democrats are hoping that by having the facts laid out in person by Mr. Taylor, Mr. Kent, and then others throughout the week and going forward, that this will bring the American people fully over to their side.
Yeah, well, we've spoken a lot about this, and I just completely disagree with the Democrats' case on this. CBS News polling right before, and other, I think NBC Wall Street Journal poll was the same thing. It's basically the American people, 48-46, the exact popular vote dynamic. 48 for impeach and remove, 46 for do not. The minds are generally made up. They fall directly on the popular vote partisan lines within the country. And ultimately, the news coverage, the leaks of the transcripts that we've seen by the Democratic staff to some of the media have really not changed the facts of the case in order to sway minds one way or the other. Seems to me that the House Democrats are living in a fantasy land where somehow by putting out a transcript and making it live and having some sound bites that they will be able to swing 20 Republican votes in the United States Senate. It's not going to happen.
I don't think they even believe that, to be honest with you, because I actually think, you know, I've spoken with a few members of Congress, Democratic members, on background and asked them, you know, if you really believed the Senate was going to convict, would you go forward with this? And they're not sure, because that gets very dicey. If he's actually removed from office, that's a very chaotic situation. That's not what they fully expect to happen here. This is about building the case. Look, the principled case that they make is that they couldn't allow this president to abuse power in this way and get away with it, that they had to at least censure him in some regard. That's the idea of what's going on here. What we were listening to as we came in was Ambassador Taylor, who's the ambassador to Ukraine, and he laid out, as was leaked previously, he laid out this sort of dual track foreign policy where you had the official track and then you had the informal Rudy Giuliani essentially track that was the one that was driving this Hunter Biden, Joe Biden investigation. Now, to your point about the leaks that have come out, in some ways those leaks have set the narrative in advance, but in other ways they've kind of undermined this moment, because we know most of what Ambassador Taylor is going to testify to here. Right now he's reading a prepared opening statement that all the news outlets have in advance. Live
coverage there. I just want to remind everybody, if the Democrats stick to that timeline or even beyond, Christmas, right, you are going to, an impeachment trial is 6 days a week in the United States Senate. All of the leading presidential candidates who are United States senators have said they're going to be there exercising their constitutional abilities. So January and February, the most critical months of the Democratic campaign for president of the United States, they're going to be stuck in an impeachment hearing that ultimately won't, or an impeachment trial in which ultimately won't result in a conviction. You think that is a net positive? I mean, I think you're out of your mind. But joining us now to dig into the historic story even more is the Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack. Bob, thank you so much for joining us on this day. So we've had what? I mean, what is it? An hour or so of testimony so far. I know you've been here with us on studio, but what are your general takeaways from the beginning of this inquiry?
Well, I mean, the thing is, the opening statements are not the most riveting, and
Right.
if I was the
they're careful,
power
they're
that
prepared.
you want to get to the Q&As. Those are the big, and we've seen some partisan jousting between Democrats and Republicans. You know, the big fish here is Rudy Giuliani, and we're going to hear that name repeatedly throughout these proceedings. And I agree with both of you, is that, you know, this is not going to lead to an acquittal. House Republicans, I mean, I don't think has gotten enough coverage. The fact that they were unanimous against the impeachment inquiry, including Will Hurd, who's on the Intelligence Committee, a swing district, who has broken with the president many times. They got 0 Republican votes, and there were 2 Democrats who voted with the Republicans.
Right, on the contrary, they actually went over a couple of Democrats. And that just shows you, I mean, look, there's a lot of desire to make this very dramatic. And it is a dramatic moment.
Sure.
But the end result is not really fundamentally in doubt here. Set the context, though, for us. What is the Democratic strategy here? What are they hoping to accomplish? And what's the Republican counter strategy here?
Well, one of the strategies that we've seen Democrats, and we wrote about this earlier this week, was that they're moving away from the quid pro quo, that a lot of people don't know what that means. Let's just say extortion, abuse of power. One of the big things that I'm looking for is, you know, what are the articles of impeachment? We know that President Trump's going to be impeached. But they want to make this, they want to spell it out. Remember, we're not going to learn, in all likelihood, anything new, because they've had this testimony. This is the theater. Now, most people don't read, so they're going to be watching. So it's how riveting the Q&As get, and do people get tired of it? That's another question. On the Republican side, it's basically this process, and we saw some of this already today. This process is not fair. We are not allowed, Republicans are not allowed to have their own witnesses, and there was some jousting over that. So this is a very partisan battle. It is historic. We have not seen this for more than 20 years, and but it is going to be, and I think the effect on the presidential campaign is going to be significant, because in all likelihood they are going to impeach him by Christmas. It's going to be impeachment Christmas, you know. And I guess looking back, you know, because a lot of us, when we've talked for many weeks and months at this desk, we didn't think it was going to get here, and then the Ukraine revelations came out. But in kind of retrospect, in these polarizing times, it had to happen.
Yeah, they just had to do it.
And it's going to happen right before Christmas. And Democrats feel, they like the fact, and you know this, Krystal, is that they're torn over the fact they know it's going to be Trump acquitted at some point, barring something new, but they like the stain of impeachment on this president, and that's what warms their hearts.
No, they feel like they had to lay down a historical marker. Ultimately, when he is acquitted, I don't know how much that really means, and he can run around and say he's vindicated, so I'm not sure how much that really means.
He can win a historic second term.
Well, and Adam Schiff actually made that case. He said, look, I think the case for impeachment is, the strongest case for impeachment is the same as the strongest case against it. The strongest case for it is setting this historical precedent. The strongest case against it is that if they then acquit in the Senate, then you've basically said, well, he got away with it, right?
Yeah, and Nancy Pelosi said when she didn't want to do impeachment, this has to be bipartisan. It is not bipartisan. Now, will any Republican in the Senate vote with Democrats? We'll see. Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, probably not, though. But you know, the Clinton impeachment, which was highly partisan, there were 30-some-odd Democrats who said, yeah, let's look into this. Let's do the impeachment inquiry. There were only a handful that voted for impeachment. But that process was actually more bipartisan than this one.
That's a good point, and I think that was really the issue from the very beginning. I mean, I think one of the main things we should really need to spend some time on is that what I was talking about with the public opinion on this, because we've heard over and over again, Bob, ever since the beginning of Mueller, well, you know, only 15% of the American public supported impeachment of Nixon at the beginning of the Watergate hearings. Why do you think this is fundamentally different? Is it fundamentally different? What do you think?
I think fundamentally different because the times are different, and it's different than the Clinton as well, and it's more polarizing. There are fewer independent, moderate voters, and that's what, you know, we know where the base is on the Democratic side and the Republican side. You know, this small middle, where are they going to be at the end of this process? I do think that Democrats have to be worried about this being drawn out, especially when you're doing 6 days a week in the Senate after this process around the holidays, and then you have Richard Burr, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, saying this could be 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes.
I mean, that's significant. So
6 days a week,
6 days a week. Yeah. I mean, usually they're here 3 days a week. So we're talking about 4 months. Now, are people, when we know the outcome of this, in all likelihood, are people going to tire of that? At the same time that, Republicans privately are saying, this was not a good thing that the president did.
Yes, right.
I mean, this was not smart. And once he got over the Mueller hump, he created this problem for himself.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think where we may end up with, in terms of Republican talking points, is somewhere basically acknowledging this wasn't amazing, but we don't think it's impeachable. He has control of foreign policy, et cetera, et cetera. Adam Schiff is obviously chair of this Intelligence Committee. He's running these hearings, and we have a little bit of his opening statement. Let's take a listen. Oh, I think we lost Adam Schiff's opening statement, but anyway, that's what he looks like, just so people know.
Adam Schiff is, Republicans have been trying, as you know, trying to demonize him. They need a boogeyman, and they've been going after Pelosi to some degree, but Schiff. Now, because Nadler wasn't as effective, Democrats and Nancy Pelosi said, we want Schiff steering this process as opposed to Nadler. As you mentioned earlier, it may go back to the judiciary for some formal process vote, but this is the prime time TV the nation's watching, and Schiff is running this. So it's going to be interesting to see how Schiff handles all these partisan jabs, because he is now a boogeyman.
Yeah, that's right. Well, okay, now that you know what he looks like, I'm told we do have some of the opening statement. Let's take a listen.
If we find that the President of the United States abused his power and invited foreign interference in our elections, or if he sought to condition, coerce, extort, or bribe an ally into conducting investigations to aid his reelection campaign and did so by withholding official acts, a White House meeting, or hundreds of millions of dollars of needed military aid, must we simply get over it? Is this what Americans should now expect from their president? If this is not impeachable conduct, what is?
I gotta say, Bob, I mean, this reminds me so much of Mueller, I think they have done themselves a disservice in terms of boxing themselves into a situation where they use rhetoric like this over and over and over again, that the historicity of the process, of the whole level of accusation, can only be viewed in a partisan lens. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, and this is a diversion, because I know Nancy Pelosi wanted to go down this route. Right. They did not win the House because of impeachment, and you talk to members and they say most people are not talking about impeachment. So she wants to turn the page on this at some point in 2020. Are we going to be able to turn the page? I mean, or is impeachment going to be dominate? Now, the other thing that you're talking about, the White House message and Republicans' message, the White House has been all over the map on this one. And now it seems like they're starting to coalesce behind a strategy because, House Republicans are saying, we want these witnesses. We want the Bidens to testify. Senate Republicans are not exactly saying that yet. They've written a letter about let's look into it. But the White House has got to be the one that coordinates and gets everyone on the same page. That's what the Clinton White House did so effectively in the 1990s.
That's a really good point.
Well, one idea that I have heard floated previously, and that is now getting some life in the media, that is giving Democrats a little bit of higher hopes that they may actually be able to remove him from office, is there's this kind of belief that, which is somewhat true, that Republicans secretly really don't like the president. They just can't say it publicly because it's destructive for them in terms of their electoral prospects. So if you could win a vote in the Senate to have a secret ballot, then maybe that would lead those 20 Republicans to vote with the Democrats to convict Trump. Take us through this one.
It's an interesting theory, and it's one that has gotten some buzz. Now, remember that they would have to vote on this. So we're going to make this a secret ballot. And so if Democrats say, well, sure, let's do that. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But let's say they say yes. So then you need 3 Republicans who need to be on the record voting. So basically, that will be portrayed by the White House as betrayal.
Well, and I think rightfully so.
Yes.
Rightfully so. It would be viewed as an anti-Trump vote, just that vote to have the secret ballot.
And think about this, and this was actually floated a little bit in the Clinton impeachment, that Republicans said if this were a secret ballot, and there were a lot of spouses of Democrats who did not like what Bill Clinton did and said he would lose if it were a secret ballot. Bill Clinton. So what it wasn't a secret ballot. And in this day and age, the media was asking him, how did you vote? How did you vote? How did you vote?
Say? Yeah,
they have ways of figuring out.
Exactly.
There's no chance that vote remains.
So this is an interesting theory, but it's not feasible.
Yeah, it's just not going to
happen. It's not feasible.
I think it's like impeachment fan fiction. I do think it's interesting that there is, we've covered this on the show, Bob, but we've seen I think 4 or 5 different stories. Even Reed, whenever he was here talking about his visit to Iowa, people are not talking about impeachment.
No.
In 11 stops at what was that big Iowa event? I forget what it was called.
The
most recent one, the Liberty and Justice Forum. 11 candidates. The only one who talked about impeachment was Tom Steyer. At the biggest event in Iowa, none of the voters are asking about it in town halls. I followed a couple of reporters that were going there. I mean, in 6 town halls across the state, different candidates, not one question. A single question about this.
We're talking about Democrats.
We're talking about Democratic voters.
Electorate.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it's smart for Republicans, and Mark Meadows was saying this this morning on TV show, where he's like, listen, we could be dealing with prescription drug costs. Of course, they're not going to get a deal on that, but it's good rhetoric.
USMCA,
which could get done. Which could get done.
Yeah.
We have a shutdown that's looming. Right. So the more Republicans are talking about the economy, which is doing quite well, and policy.
Right.
And Democrats have to talk about impeachment because that's all the media is really covering. Are we talking about policy? Of course not.
No, I mean that we are here. And on Rising, but in general, no. That's the part. And Democrats have always said like we can walk and chew gum.
Yeah.
But it's not reality.
No.
The reality is that cable news coverage is going to be monolithically dominated by this, and rightfully so. It is a historic moment when you move to potentially impeach a president. And so there's a real opportunity cost here. It's not just that you're fixating on this, it's also what you're not able to talk about while you are fixating on that. We can put up a graphic on the screen that has some details about the sort of impeachment process and what it actually means. As we've said, this does not mean that he's going to be removed from office. That articles of impeachment are drawn up by the House of Representatives and passed doesn't mean he's going to be removed. They don't have to be criminal offenses. The House is gathering evidence as we see now. They're hearing testimony. They draft the articles. And you need a majority House vote to ultimately charge the president. Then it moves to the Senate. And if 2/3 of senators vote to convict the president on those House charges, he is then removed from office. And that's when it just,
that's an interesting one.
Saagar said, gets into sort of impeachment fan fiction. Jeff Flake, and this is another thing that Democrats seize on. Jeff Flake said, I can't remember the number exactly, that if it was a secret ballot, there's probably 30 Republicans that would vote for impeachment. And so there's a lot of hopefulness hung on that one insight from one guy who is no longer in the Senate.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'm sure there would be some Republicans, but at the same time, Republicans are not scared of this Democratic field. They're looking at President Trump. He has flaws. He became president. He won an election.
Right.
These Democratic candidates have this. There's no Barack Obama in this group, at least not yet.
Yeah.
So, and you have other candidates like Deval Patrick and Mike Bloomberg saying, "Let me in. I can beat these guys." So, I think that overall, yes, there will be some Republicans who are tired of Trump. They're tired of reporters asking about his latest tweets, but they also like his policies. They like the tax law. They like how the economy is doing well.
He's popular.
And he's popular.
With Republicans, he's popular.
Yes. Where
That's
a lot
the
of these
bottom
people
line.
are from. Last thing I want to talk about here, which is what Krystal was saying, the opportunity of cost to the nation is immense. I mean, Bob, you understand as somebody in Washington, 6 days a week for 6 to 8 weeks in the United States Senate.
Yeah.
What's the most precious thing in this town? Floor time on the United States Senate. In order for debates, there are all these arcane rules people don't understand. Legislation has to be debated for 30 hours before it can come up for a vote. I mean, it's over. You can't pass anything for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you're going right into the general election.
And this will also hurt with nominations, which is something Mitch McConnell talks about and the president talks about. They're going to have to clear the schedule for a long time, and that's going to. Now, at the same time, what is not a lot of policy is actually getting done.
Sure, but I mean,
and that's what when House Democrats, when they won, when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker the first time, they actually worked with President Bush, and they actually got a fair amount done with Bush that actually was signed into law. Now Nancy Pelosi is going to have to say, okay, what did you do? Now I think her counter is like, listen, we passed so many bills.
HR 1,
it's Mitch McConnell who's blocking it. But what are people going to remember? Going to remember impeachment?
Yeah, I think so too.
How do you think he is going to ultimately play things in the Senate?
McConnell?
Yeah.
I think he's, Mitch McConnell is an institutionalist. He has said we need to do a trial. He does not want to do this motion to dismiss, which would go away. But remember, Tom Daschle and Trent Lott back in the Clinton days, they had a rules package that passed 100-0, okay, of the parameters of the process. Right. There's just no way they're going to be able to get a 100-0 vote. But I do think that they're going to be saying, listen, let's come to some agreement here. But also, I mean, the fact that if it goes on for 6 to 8 weeks, I mean, that is a long time. Right. But maybe that plays in McConnell's strategy, like, well, we had to do this.
Right. Well, and listen, don't forget he's going to be on the ballot in 2020 as well, and people will be watching very closely to make sure he's backing up the president in the way that they think that he should, which has not always been the case in the state of Kentucky. That's why part of why he's much less popular than Trump is in the state.
And most people outside the Beltway, I don't think, knew who Mitch McConnell was in his last re-election race, which was a hard-fought contest. He won it by about 5 points. Now, because of Garland and Supreme Court battles, they know who Mitch McConnell is. So fundraising for Democrats, as you know, Krystal, is not going to be approval against Mitch McConnell.
They'll have plenty of money.
The problem is winning and defeating Mitch McConnell, which will probably be his last term in office.
Almost like, all right. Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really interesting, historic day for the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great to have your perspective on this day. Thank you all so much for joining us for this live coverage, and we will see you back here tomorrow for more Rising.